This weekend's project is rebuilding the lower control arms on the Jeep. What we're looking at is the factory control arms, lower control arms that I replaced out of the vehicle there. And you can see where the metal is all rotted away, and you can actually see the rubber of the bushing in there. If we could see the rubber through the metal there, that means that there's nothing in between here. So you've just got a hole on this side and a hole on this side that this bushing is being pressed into. And while you're doing that, you'd have to have a piece of metal in between here to kind of keep this gap while you're pressing the new bushing in and also pressing the old one out. Second to that, the material is pretty thin and it's got this C-channel kind of open concept here that allows the metal to kind of twist a little bit, right? I do believe that's why we have this open concept here, because this could kind of twist and articulate and dampen some of the forces and energy when you're driving. Here's the old rubbers there. You can see that they're really wore out. We've got some rust and deterioration going on in there. Here's the other side, all cracked up, no good. What a person could do is you can in fact change these bushings if you wanted to. This is a part number for anybody who's interested, and this comes in a set. These are the bushings removed out of the box, and again, they come in a set. They're not the same. They're two different bushings. You can tell some of the differences by that hole on this one, and that one doesn't have it. Another difference is going to be this one here is physically wider than this one. That's why you can't install it the wrong way, because both ends are different. So it only installs one way and you can't mix it up. Now this is an example of opposite ends here. So this bushing goes to that one and this bushing goes to that one. But these two bushings would be for one arm. What I'm doing is I'm building a stronger lower control arm. So I found some material here. We started off with a piece of square tubing. Now that's going to be about 2 inch by 3 inch. Next I grabbed some pipe and then I turned them down to accept our bushings. Both of the bores on these bushings are the same outside diameter. I just turned that down, and that's probably about a 10th thou clearance, if that I got going on in there. When you take a look at the bushing itself, you might be able to tell there's a little bit of a raised portion right here. You can slightly see that maybe. So then when you're pressing this in from here to here, so 2/3 of it is gonna slide inside the bore. 2/3 of the bushing slides into the bore, and then this piece here, when you push this down, that's going to be your interference fit with this metal and this, and that's what's going to hold that tight inside the bore there when you're installing these bushings. So the outside diameter is the same for both of them, and I built those pipes. I just bored those out to accept those bushings, and then next we want to install those into the square tubing. This is the total length of our lower control arm here. And what I'm gonna do is start off with some pilot holes here. So I've measured these pilot holes, and that's our starting point. With it flipped over on the other side, we can see where I started drilling those pellet holes larger. So these two here, those are gonna be drilled out to a 1 inch diameter, and I'm just using a step drill right there. And that's to accommodate for these threaded bushings that we're gonna install in those holes there. This one here is gonna be a 3 inch hole, and we're gonna be using the 3 inch hole saw right there to cut these. And I cut them on both sides. So I measure on both sides and then I drill on both sides. This side here, you can see I still have my pilot holes. This side here, you can see that I've drilled them out. So I'll do the same thing on the other side. Once we have those holes drilled, then what I'm gonna do is I have my pipe, and then I'm going to put it inside the holes there. And then what I did was I made this jig here so that everything will get manufactured to the same size and specs. So I took the old control arm and then I used that to create this jig, and then I'll put all my pieces on there, I'll fit everything together, and then I'll tack weld it. And then after tack welding it, I'm gonna seam weld it. On this side here, I'm trying to show you where I've got that gap. We've got lots of room to play with to make sure that when we put it on the jig, that these things are going to be parallel and everything's going to line up the way we want it to. And then I just tack weld it, and then you can see that I've got a gap in there, so I can fill that gap in with weld, and it'll be completely welded all the way around. On this side here, you can see where I've seam welded everything in place. Now another feature to this thing, if you chose to do it, was added strength. So what I did was I drilled these holes on here, and you can see inside that I've got a plate of steel. Here you can see we can install that plate inside the square tubing here, and that's the idea is to give it more strength. So it comes on a diagonal here, and I'll be drilling holes on this corner and this corner here, and then I'll plug weld them. This side shows the holes and the plate on the inside, and that's going to be in between these two pieces here. And then when we look on this side, that's an example of all the plug welds to hold that in place. Here's an example of using the jig to weld everything together, and the purpose of that was to make sure that we maintain that same distance from center to center between the bolts for the center of the bushings, and line everything up, kind of tack it all up, and then seam weld it all together. We've installed these threaded bushings right here, and this is going to be the same size as the bolt for the bushing for the lower control arm, which is a 9/16 diameter, and that's going to equate to 7/8 and a 13/16 wrench size. I do believe the head of the bolt is 13/16 and the nut is a 7/8. If we take a look over at this side, I'm going to use these threaded bushings in order to push that in. And what I have is my first plate here, and that's going to go around, and this outside diameter is meant to contact this outer lip here, this metal lip that's on there. And this here is going to press that flush to our square stock right there, bottom it out. But as you can see, this portion sticks up right here, so then I have this other plate right there, and that's going to go on there. And then we'll have our factory bolt, right? This is that 9/16 diameter bolt that's going to go in there, and then these are our two plates. Now on the underside here, what we have is we have two bolts here, one on either side. So we have one here and one there, and they're threaded into our threaded bushing. And then I just have these nuts that I've drilled out as spacers, and that's what we're going to use there. And then I've got this 1-inch square stock that we're using to pull that bushing in. So that bolt is going to thread into our nut that's tacked onto here, and then we're going to just keep turning that down until the bushing is seated all the way down. Up top here, we got a few different methods we can use. I tried using the impact, but didn't have quite enough jam to get it seated to the final resting spot there. You could use 2 wrenches for leverage there. Apart from 2 wrenches, you could just use your long bar, and then just have, again, the 13/16, and then you'll use that, and that'll get that seated down into place where we want it. It doesn't matter on what end that you install it. The only thing that there is the distance between the 2 centers here. You can put this bushing over there, or it doesn't matter, just as long as you get the bushings in, and then when you install it, it has to go in a certain way, but it's pretty uniform across the board here. We're just using these threaded portions as installation tools to install our bushings. This is basically our inside bore. And then I made this one here, and it fits just inside there. So that is just enough clearance that that's going to fit inside there, inside the bore. And this one here is for removing the bushing. This is our outside diameter on the bushing here. So we've made this, and again, that's going to go over top. It's going to be the same diameter as that, with enough clearance to go inside our inside bore here. And then again, we have another plate here that goes on top, and that's just going to accommodate for this space here, right, for where that sticks up. So we have that on there, then we put this on there, and then again, that's going to be our 9/16 for the outside diameter of the bolt. And then we would use this to push the bushing out. Whereas we use this to install the bushing on the other side, this is an example of removing the bushing. So we have our same H-bar here, we have our same 2 bolts that are threaded into our threaded bushings here. The difference is, in this case, we're going to have our 2 plates, and these are going to go over our bolt. Once those plates are over the bolt like that, this plate here is going to rest up against that outside diameter of the bushing, and then push it through the bore. And then, as we can see here, it's threading into the nut. And then we have these 2 spacers right here. This is going to pull or push this bushing out of the bore. Once we get past this portion here, because that's the tension part that holds it in there, so theoretically once you get past that tight spot there, this here should be loose enough that it should come out. So far, this is what we've got for our installation and removal equipment right here. We've got a couple of bolts that are going to thread into those bushings that we have. We have a couple different spacers here, and then we have our plates. This is for removal. This is for installation, and then we have our bolt itself. The idea is that you'll actually use the bolt that holds the lower control arm into the vehicle, which would roughly be about the same size as this, and that's what you're using to install it and uninstall it. With the removal of that bolt that's already in the vehicle there, these would be the extra components that you would carry with you so that you could do this job out in the field. What I'm going to have to do though is I'm going to have to come up with something to make this a little stronger, because as you can see, it's bent the 1-inch square tubing for our installation of that bushing there. So what I might end up having to do is build another bushing that welds in here, and then there's some more strength there so it doesn't deform like it has. The last thing we do after we've got everything installed here is we want to test it with our jig, and that was what we used to build it with, to make sure that we have that equal distance between the bushings. So when we build the next one, everything's going to match. It'll be the same distance between those center lines of the bushings there. As you can see, we've got it so that it is fitting just as it should there. This is the complete assembly of our new lower control arm here. We've done this for a couple of reasons. One is strength. If you take a look at this one here, it's just some thin metal that's open-ended in here, and we don't have anything in there, where we've added this now. So this is going to be our inside bore, where that's absent right there. So that's going to add a bunch of strength for our bushing, and we won't end up with a situation like that. This one is all open, thinner metal. This one here is a box tube design all the way through. We've also added that piece of metal on the inside here to add strength. I do believe that these two threaded portions are going to add strength as well, along with this. The second thing is the ease of changing the bushing here. You'd have to put something in here, try to keep that separated while you're trying to remove and install a new bushing in here. This one here, especially aided with our threaded bushings, it's going to be easier to install and remove the bushing, and it was also designed that way so that you could do it on the road or wherever you are. You don't need to be in a shop with a hydraulic press in order to change the bushings. That was one of the primary reasons behind this new design here.